Well, welcome to the Discipleship for the Decades podcast, where real faith meets real life. I'm Jeremy. I'm your host for episode number 7 today, joined by the Reverend Karis Kemp. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, we are excited to be with you. It's a little bit of a kind of rainy, overcast kind of day. We were talking about our vest, right?
Vests. We both have vests on. So we're going cash today.
Yeah, vest appreciation.
If you're listening, you're missing the fashion statement we're making right now, which
Yes.
is really not that important because we have other things to talk about.
Exactly. If you want to see us, though, you can always go to YouTube and search Bethel Church LKN, and you can see us talk in addition to hearing us talk. So we are continuing in our sermon series, Make This Place Your Home. This was actually your final week.
Yes.
Of preaching, what, 4 straight weeks?
4 straight weeks. And
we welcome.
Cool to go through a series. And I've never preached Colossians for this long. So that's been fun for me to say, Lord, where are you going to take us on this adventure in Colossians? And for me, it was really neat to see. I tell people often when I'm preaching, I feel like I'm giving birth to a sermon baby. Like you're waiting until God kind of shows up and gives you that one nugget that's going to make it all come together. It's labor, it's work, but then it's beauty because all of a sudden you go, oh, look what you did, Lord. Look what you showed me. So I really feel that every week in the sense that I feel very at his mercy, but also really excited when a message seems to say something. So,
and for those who probably have never had to write a sermon, it is different writing a one-off as opposed to being able to weave a story together, right? Which is cool of a series. And we welcome Pastor Tom. Will be back this week, so it will be great. We'll probably see him next week on the podcast, or maybe in 2 weeks. But yeah, so Make This Place Your Home. This week it was all about kind of being connected or disconnected from the head.
Yeah.
You want to give us like a kind of 1-minute synopsis of kind of what the point was?
Yeah. Well, and in speaking to God's miraculous hook that he usually gives to me as I'm working on sermons, really the hook was don't lose your head. And I was reading the text and there's this section in chapter 2, verse 19, where Paul's talking about the people who become disconnected with the head, who is Christ. And basically he says just that. And I thought, if I were Eugene Peterson paraphrasing this in the Message, which I did look at the Message version, but I don't think he uses don't use your head, don't lose your head, use your head, don't lose your head. So yeah, that's what came to mind. And that framework helped me really understand the whole text in a different way. So.
Well, and this idea that it's super easy to get disconnected from the head, right? And I think that's one of the things I wanted to put voice to is like, we don't often, like, we're in our Bible app every day reading, and then we miss a day, and then we look back 3 weeks later and go, wow, I missed one day, and here we are 3 weeks later, and I haven't picked it back up. It is not easy, or it is easy, I think, to get disconnected, and often we don't realize that. And I think there's 2 types of disconnections, right? It's the like disconnection in my day where something happens, and then there's the disconnection of like a season of where life's just kind of crappy right now, right? Like I don't want to be in the Word. I don't necessarily want to pray. Like I'm just so down that I, don't take the time, or I forget, or whatever that is, that it just like it turns into more than just
a one-time occurrence.
Yeah.
Well, and you realize, theologically, there's our connection to Christ, and that's really how we respond to God's story. And so when we're in the Word, that's our response. We're reading the Word, not necessarily, at least I don't go there anymore just to gain more knowledge. It really is, what do you have to say and how am I supposed to respond? And so there's that sense of, it's like dating, right? You can't date somebody and say, we're not going to hang out.
Yep.
You're not going to get to know somebody if you're not hanging out. And so I think this idea of connection to the head, it's two-sided, because I think there's times where we feel very disconnected, but God is very connected with us.
Yep.
That never ends. We know that's theologically true, but maybe our awareness.
Well,
with
and it's
God.
equipping us, that connection, being in the Word, praying is equipping us, yes, not to just have knowledge up here, but it's to be making disciples. It's about going out. It's about, that's what Bethel 200 is all about, right? This big dream that we've got for our context. But I think God gives those big dreams, big goals. If you're a Blaze Youth person, you've heard us talk about these, right? Like he gives us, and he also gives us the strength, but that strength comes through the prayer and the reading of the Word. And so when we get disconnected from the head, and we get disconnected from the Word, and we get disconnected from prayer, that, at least for me, that's when I often find myself feeling the most down, right? Mentally, not feeling like I've got physical energy. Like the whole rest of me feels like I'm out of whack when that's the case. I don't know if you find that's true for you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I was telling Jeremy a story as we were just talking, and remember back in Seattle, my children were much younger, preschoolers back then, and we would meet with a family once a week regularly, and it was a great practice. It was a spiritual practice, really, for both of us, was this check-in of how are you doing? And it was always fun because these people were dear friends. Randy's friend from college, and we ended up being in the same town at the same time, had kids the same age. But I remember walking with my friend Kathy one day and just feeling like, man, I just feeling funky. I'm feeling like I'm not, just kind of down on the whole religion thing. And I was ranting. And she looks at me and totally called it, which is another point about being connected with the body and the head. So the body, my friend Kathy tells me, well, have you been studying scripture at all? Well, no, not really. Have you been praying? No. And so you're right. There's a direct correlation between, I guess, our own excitement and awareness. It's like staying in shape, right? It's going to feel awful if you're running and you haven't run for 30 days. And here you are hitting the trail trying to bang out 3 miles. It's going to feel awful.
Yep.
But when you're in practice, you're like, man, I'm in the flow. And so I think this idea of connection to the head on our part, it does take practice. And it does mean this continual, I need to keep this before me. And when I see these signs of, I'm behaving poorly, or I'm reacting to this situation with not the fruit of the Spirit, maybe there's something to look into on the spiritual health side.
Well, I want to deeper or go deeper on that thought about the being connected to the head and kind of to the body, if you want to give a little voice to that. But that idea that, like, it's not just, as you said earlier, it's not just an arm, right, and attached to a head, right? It's much bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of a weird looking image, right? To think of just a head and an arm, and that's not the full picture of what's supposed to be. And so when I think about people saying, okay, it's me and my Jesus, I'm good with Jesus, he and I are good. Great. But the whole point of you and Jesus being good is so that you can be part of the body, so that you can be working in community. And I realize we don't always have healthy models of how that looks done well, but there are so many, history is ripe with models of look what Christians can do when they are equipped, being connected to the head and to each other. Educational institutions, hospitals, mission organizations, so many good things that have come from the body doing its thing. And so, that connection to the head and the living out.
Do we, and this is something I would say, like, anyone who's listening, and I'll challenge myself to this too, is find your Kathy, right, who's willing to call you out on stuff, right? Yeah. Oftentimes I feel like we maybe, I know in my case, sometimes I shy away from that type of community because most people don't like to hear what they're doing wrong, right? They don't like to be called out for things, but that's healthy. That's biblical. That's what we need in our lives, are those people that can do it lovingly, right? Yeah. We can go on and on about surrounding ourselves with people who do that, but it's not loving, right? We have plenty of those in our lives. Yeah. So if we're going to let those people be in our lives, why aren't we pulling in other people who can go, hey, right, this isn't who you are,
Yeah.
or this isn't how you're supposed to think.
Yeah, that there can be good accountability. Well, and I was thinking, my friend Kathy, right? For every Kathy and her statement to me, it wasn't like every time we talked, it was always this harsh accountability going on. It was a lot of joy. And I think of one night where Corey, our friend, he's a really tall, redheaded guy. And you know those tunnels that you have for little preschool kids to climb through? Yep. So he put it on like a big worm, and it was just kind of walking around like this big worm. And so that's also part of the body, right? The part of the body that's joy, that gives you life, that you go, man, I love being around this person because something good in me comes out from being around them. Same thing with accountability, you know, because you have the joy part, you can also take that, oh, okay, you're right. You can speak into that.
Well, and I wasn't anticipating this transition, but I think it'll work really nice. Also, something that you said Sunday in the sermon was that don't be so, you're going to have to help me with it.
Don't be so heavenly minded that you are no earthly good.
And I think that's an instance where we go, okay, the Kathys in our lives don't call us out all the time, right? Yeah, there is that joy piece. And so you can't be so stuck in trying to be perfect. I think to one of our youth right now who is on an amazing journey in his walk with Christ, but he often goes, well, I'm not perfect. I'm not always thinking about God. I'm not always, and it's like that statement is what comes to mind. It's like, no, we need to put an emphasis on it. Right? We need the head to be the head. It needs to be at the top, but we do need to be, you know, earthly good.
Our feet grounded in the earth
at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was something that came out. Now, I think
because how does perfection as goal, how does that help anyone? Unless you're Jesus and really said, okay, I live the perfect life, and his whole point of living perfection was so that he could take that sacrificial role of, because I have followed the law perfectly, yes, I can say, I could take all the sin on me because I don't deserve it, but I'm going to take it anyway. Yep. And so there's one person, one God person who gets to claim that, and the rest of us, I don't know. It's hard to talk to somebody who's perfect.
Well, and it comes
in a real way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it makes us like we're setting ourselves up for failure if we are expecting to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
And that's often where my mind always goes is it's like you need the realistic expectations up front of, okay, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to try to be the best I can. I'm going to live based off of what I'm reading in Scripture, what God's calling me to in my prayers, but I'm not going to expect to be perfect because I'm just going to let myself down. And then that's when I think we end up, we talk about beating ourselves up, and then we get in a bad spot, and then maybe the Scripture reading stops.
Yeah, I was gonna push into that. So you do have a goal that you're reading through Scripture, and perhaps you're alluding to this means that maybe you've missed a day or two, and maybe Jeremy, youth pastor, Bethel Presbyterian Church, have you had days where you're like, yeah, I got off my rhythm, and how's that been for you?
Yeah, so what Karis is alluding to is the fact that you can also do this too if you feel like you want to connect with me. We can connect on the Bible app, but Cherilee Cobble has a read through the Bible in 365 days, so reading through it in a year. So yeah, that's my goal. Yes, I am alluding to the fact that I've missed a few days, and yeah, you just have to just know that you know what, I'm not perfect.
And I think that makes Jeremy more endearing. Am I right, folks? That he perhaps misses a day in his 365-day.
Oh gosh, yeah. If you think
I can relate now.
Yeah. If you think that this guy is anywhere close to no, I'm on the opposite spectrum of perfect. But that's okay, right? Because we've got Jesus, and that's what this is all about. But if you want to connect reading through the Bible in a year, absolutely. And the Bible app is a great, when we talk about accountability. And we had a meeting of the praise team the other night, and there was this talk of, hey, how can we read more Scripture together? And the Bible app is an amazing resource. right on your phone with reading plans. Like this one, you read several chapters of some book, and then you go listen to a 10-minute podcast explaining what you read, the high points, what's the God shot for the day. Like it's super simple, but you can connect with your friends that way and say, hey, let's connect on this reading plan, work through a plan together, comment back and forth with each other without actually having to have a conversation, in-person conversation, where it may be hard because you two work jobs or, you're in different phases of life. And
to that, you saying, okay, here's a method that's worked. I think there's a lot of getting back to the disconnection from the head idea. There's so many of us, you are busy people. You have so much on your plate. And justifiably, there's a day where I would probably look at your schedule and say, yeah, I don't know where I'd squeeze in devotions in your day. I have no idea where that could. And I think we feel that weight. We feel that burden of this. Yeah. And so I guess hear us when we're saying stay connected to the head, that there's practices that we do. And when you feel like you're falling off the wagon, I love it. Get your Kathys, get your Jeremys, get your people in your life to say, hey, I need accountability. I need help staying connected. And
what that leads to, and where you went in the sermon Sunday, is when we're not connected like we should be to the head, we often find ourselves putting things at the top of our priority list, or at the top of this is where our focus is, that are replacing God as the head, right? And you listed a long list of P's, and I was trying to think back to all the P's. We're going to see how many of the P's, and you can't look in the sermon.
I got my notes. Okay, I'll cover them up.
You can try. I remember personality. I think I remember people, place. My personal favorite, maybe one we'll talk about just for just a moment, is, and I've lost it.
Perceived.
Yeah, perceived protection.
Yeah.
Any other P's? There was a...
Oh, man. I was just going through the news in my head, right? And you just think of parties and politics and so much of even, the panic around COVID and
pandemic.
Propaganda. Right? So much that we're just... I love it. My dad often uses this, you're drinking through the fire hose phrase, and I use it a lot. I steal it from him. He probably stole it from somebody else. But I think we're inundated with what the world wants us to put at the head. And so it's so easy for us to become accustomed to that and to just be normalized to, oh yeah, this is the head because this is how I'm being shaped. And I think that's the heart of spiritual practice and Christian practice, is to say, okay, there is a force that wants to shape me into a mold. And so in practicing staying connected to the head, I'm shaping more according to Christ. And that's the shape I want to conform to. And I don't think I opened up screw tape letters in this book because I think this idea of we don't even realize how being shaped we are, and that there is this enemy agenda that's going on to say, okay, I want you to put your feelings about whatever your soapbox is.
Yep.
We want that to be elevated so much further than Christ's humility in your life, or kindness, or respect. Right?
And circle back to that kind of analogy of the head and the body, right? And the fact that like the head's helping the heart pump the blood, right? Think of blood of kind of how we're being shaped. If the head isn't Christ and we're being shaped and molded by something else, the rest of the body, right? If we're connected to it, starts to take some of that on too, because we're pumping, right?
Yeah. I see like edema. I see this swollen hand, right?
Yep.
Okay, all the blood's going here right now, and that's not healthy. That's debilitating, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's absolutely crucial, and why we're talking about this is to make sure that we're keeping the head what it's supposed to be. And and realizing that there is so much being attempting to shape us every single day. And when you slip on just half a day, if you slip in the morning, right, something's going to be there to fill it, right? We know that, and it doesn't matter if you're retired, working, in school, heck, a preschooler. I mean, whatever, right? Our lives are so busy and it's filled with so much stuff that something else is automatically going to get bumped up there, right? We don't even have to do anything, right? The minute something slips,
we become unhinged easily.
There's something that goes right into that spot.
Well, I was thinking about kids out there right now who are doing school online, and truly from like 8 in the morning until 4 p.m. at night, you are online doing schooling. And then you need to step away and get some fresh air, but you still have homework to do. So I think of a lot of you in middle school, high school, wow, you have a lot going on and it's consuming so much of your time. What does that look like for you to say, how do I stay connected to the head? And it's not always in daily Bible reading, right? It's not always taking an hour where you put your quiet music on and you read your scripture and here's your commentary. That is wonderful when you have that. Sometimes it truly is saying, okay, Lord, I'm just going to breathe for 5 minutes and focus on one verse. That's all I got right now, Lord. But to give it to him and to say, in those 5 minutes, will you feed me? Will you meet me here?
Well, and that's where I think the practical piece to all this comes in. And it's not just for, we call out students. It's great for students, but it's not, I mean, it's for everyone, right?
Yeah.
We're not expecting, and we shouldn't expect for ourselves, right? It goes back to that perfection piece, to go from 0 to 60 immediately, right? We need to be willing to take steps to get to where we need to go, but know that you're not just going to start, you're not going to read through the Bible in a year and every single day do it, right? You may, and that's great, but you might slip and that's okay too, right? Yeah. But start small, maybe with just a little bit of, maybe it's a verse, maybe it's a 2-minute prayer, maybe it turns into a chapter that turns into a 10-minute prayer, right? That turns into, maybe you want to read the whole book of 1 Timothy, right? At one sitting. And then you're doing a 30-minute prayer. Then you're learning to pray all day without it necessarily having to feel like it's a structured kind of, like, you can, it's easy with repetition to get, I think, to that inline, but you have to be willing to put the reps in, kind of going back to that, giving kind of that strength piece, right? Like, it ties right into people who do CrossFit and F3 and all the different groups. Like, you have to put the reps in order to get strong enough, and it's not going to always feel the best in the process, right? Trying to get there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to encourage people, your practice might look different in different seasons of what that is. I was talking to a woman from our church who loves to doodle, and so she was talking about how she brings doodling into her scripture reading, and that is part of worship. It's okay to make it fun with doodles. There's a pastor that I know who I followed his sermons for a long time, and he has this thing called Coffee with God. And so his time it's always have to have coffee there. And there has to be this like, this is the good stuff, right? That there can be this expectation as you step into being connected to the head, that it can be fun and joyful and life-giving and kind of suited to your personality as well, of what staying connected to the head looks like. And so hopefully, I guess, is our hope is that you've been encouraged just to know it's okay to be unhinged. It happens. It's real daily life. And maybe as we've been talking, a few of these ideas might have resonated with you about, okay, what's this baby step that I can take? Or how do I stay connected in a world that feels very, it's hard. It's hard to do sometimes.
Well, and the whole reason behind this podcast being called Discipleship for the Decades is we use the term decades because discipleship looks different for everybody. So although we want you to stay connected to the head and understand that you're going to slip, but discipleship is going to look different for, so-and-so who's retired from 65 years of work at some corporation versus 32-year-old Jeremy versus,
I like that he didn't name my age.
Yeah, I'm
You'll
smarter
get that
than
later
that.
sometime.
Smarter than that. But again, we want you to feel equipped and to know that you can fail and it's okay and God's there for you, but that your discipleship journey doesn't have to look a certain way. And I think that's a cool thing to remember. So we're glad we could spend a little bit of time with you. So we just thanks for tuning in each week. We hope that this is valuable to each of you. And because I know it's valuable to us as we talk through ways that we can tangibly live out our faith in our context that God's placed us. So
tune in next week, episode 8.
Yes, we will see you then. Bye, guys.
Bye.